older siblings overestimate what happens to lastborns. They think that lastborns are mollycoddles, they think they have too much love and they're cut too much slack, and parents are way too mellow with them. There's a flip side of this, which is you're the only one who witnesses the house emptying. When people talk about empty nesting, I witnessed it firsthand, where my brother left and went to university, and it was just me and mom. And while my dad was busy climbing job groups in the ministry he was working at, it was just me and mom. I was so close to my mom, people used to say I'm her handbag. And university, I studied education, but I also got, a couple of majors and a minor. The majors were in alcohol and women. The minors was in sherehe. So 3 years into university, when I was what we would call a TTY, a tired third year, and I have to come home. I remember the phone call was at 3 a.m, and I was in my sister's house. And my brother-in-law picked up the phone and he spoke to my uncle who was in America. And my uncle told him, "Oh, mom is not feeling well. All of you need to travel down." The truth, my mom had passed. I didn't know this on my journey from Nairobi to Eldoret, where she was a teacher now at Moi Girls High School in Eldoret. I arrived at Moi Girls and I looked at my dad, and the man had aged like 15 years. And before he even started speaking, I knew. Things happened in a whirlwind. Committees were formed. And it was time to dispatch my mom. Strange things happen when death takes place. Death has a way of giving us lessons we don't want to learn. And my mom's death was no different. All of a sudden, aunties started fighting over her clothes and her jewelry. Uncles started raising money that they were not submitting. My father regressed to a 17-year-old wearing sneakers and buying new cars. And my sisters retreated to their marriages. Everyone was older than I was, and I was the only one left at home. And for the very first time, I had to forge a relationship with my father, someone I hadn't known very well. That required a lot of grace on my part, because I realized this old man was also going through a lot of grief. Just like I was dealing with it, he was dealing with it in his own way. So I made a choice to become his friend. And I never criticized or talked about anything he did, right or wrong. My father, who was living in Nakuru at the time, had also become part of these happy, clappy Pentecostal churches. So in order for me to get closer to my father, I was required to go to these churches. And my father would tell me, "Well, you need to come to church service, otherwise I'm not going to give you any pocket money today." So it goes without saying I would show up at the church services. But these church services kind of morphed into something else. I remember once going into a very famous public house in Nakuru, running into my then pastor with ladies from the church choir. Fearing that I was going to out him, he offered to make me the head of the youth. I never outed him, but I was very disappointed in what I called the clergy. So after university had already planted the seeds that would eventually take me to my career in media and in entertainment. First, it started in entertainment, and it ended up in media. In 1999, I set up and ran Kenya's first entertainment website called kelele.com. Nobody even knew what an email address was. I was way ahead of my time. In 1999, I ran Miss Kenya in the Rift Valley. In 1999, I decided that I wanted to start a career in media. I went into film studios, studied as an editor, and became an intern at Level 1 Productions. That was my first television job. Moses Nderito gave me a chance, and I ran with it. Around this time as well is when I heard about Judy Kibinge and Njeri Karago setting up Kenya's first feature film called Dangerous Affair. And I wanted in. And I went to Dangerous Affair, introduced myself to Judy, introduced myself to Njeri, and I said, well, I'm here. I just want to work. Give me something. And I became a runner on this show. That's where I met Tosh Gitonga for the first time. I met Nini Washera for the first time. I met quite a number of people. Martin Mujwa was, I think, the DOP at the time. But then I met a girl. I got married. I migrated to the UK. This is all 3 years, 3.5 years, barely 3.5 years after my mom passing on. So I landed in the UK, didn't know anybody, bought myself a bike and a map, and used to take rides in London to orient myself. I had one contact only, a man called Charlie Foreman. And I asked Charlie, please help me. And I sent him, I think, about 300 emails. And for 2 months, Charlie never responded. And then one day, Charlie called me out of the blue. And he said, why don't you come down to the office and we have a chat? And I said, no problem. I showed up in the office. We had what I thought was a chat. Later, I was to find out it was an interview. He then said to me, well, you know, my assistant is going off to Paris for a week. Why don't you come and be my assistant? I said, no problem. I went in for 1 week and I never left. Working in production companies in London proved to be something very interesting for me. My first daughter was born and I got a second postgraduate in drugs. Fast forward in 2005, my friend Charlie Foreman, who'd introduced me to London and taken me under his wing, committed suicide. Death has a way of teaching you lessons that you don't want to learn. I knew it was the beginning of the end of my time in London. But then I was done with London. I had started drinking a lot. I was pretending like my alcohol was just social. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. 2006, I moved back to Nairobi. Met a few people, went to Eldoret, came back, met a few people, one of whom was Oyunga Pala. And Oyunga Pala was like, well, we have this new magazine we're setting up. Do you want to be part of it? And I was like, yes, I jumped at the chance. And we then set up Adam by Kenyan Men for Kenyan Men. It was supposed to be our GQ. 2008, Adam folded because of the global crunch. But by which point I had seen the sign on the wall and I had made a leap from a frying pan to the fire. The leap was from Adam magazine to The Star, which was a new newspaper that had been started by Radio Africa. I was headhunted to become society editor. Because in the words of the CEO, if you could describe society, you could describe everyone. Society was an interesting space because I was invited to every party in Nairobi. I mean, my marriage was going to shit. My job was not suffering. But everybody wanted me at their party. And my drinking had gone, I think I'd counted once, 127 days in a row I had been drunk. I could function. And what was interesting is I could retain information even when I was drunk. So if you came and chatted to me even when I was really drunk and you thought I forgot about it, like Michael Joseph once found out, I published it. But by this point, my drinking had become really bad. And 3 years into my job as society editor, I suddenly resigned. I resigned because I had burnt out. Those of you who work in media understand this. The job is not just a job, it's a lifestyle. And my lifestyle was crashing. I left society and went to Mnet, working as a producer for Mashariki Mix. And at Mashariki Mix, while I was driving in Malindi, drank off of my head at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I crashed a hired car. Soon after, I received an email, like I'd received numerous ones before that. We regret to inform you that your services are no longer required. I lost count of how many jobs I lost because of my drinking. 2 weeks after I'd been fired, I got in the car, I went to Baricho Road, drinking. And on exiting Baricho Road, for some reason, I decided to go down Mombasa Road. And I adopted a light. One minute I was talking on the phone to my friend. The next minute, all the airbags in the car had popped up. I could hear my friend kind of talking in the background, somewhere inside the car. It was upside down, and I didn't know what was going on. And when I was driving, there was no one on the road. 10 seconds after the accident, there was like 30 people. I'm like, where did you all come from? I got out of the car, and I stood in that rain as we waited for the traffic police and the breakdown to come and take the car. And I realized I was fucking up. And this is the thing about a comeback story. You are never too far gone for you to make a comeback. You're never too far gone for you to realize that no matter how bad things are, no matter how big a hole you have dug yourself into, this is not how it's going to end. A week after that accident, my auntie intervened. She called me for a conversation, and that was the beginning of my journey. So at 37 years old, having drunk for 20 years, smoked cigarettes for 20 years, partied and had drugs for 20 years, I finally decided it was time for me to change. I didn't go to an AA. I think I went to one meeting. I just stopped. I just woke up one morning and I was like, this is it. So I stopped the liquor, I stopped the booze, I stopped the drugs, I stopped the cigarettes. And people were taking bets as to how long I would take before I caved in and collapsed and went back. And it didn't happen. That was 10 years ago. Ten years ago, something else also happened. Met my current wife. But just before we met, while I was going through my crash and my rebirth, a friend of mine called Halima Mohammed, who's in the audience here tonight, gave me my first Quran. I didn't realize it, but I was actually on a spiritual journey, trying to find my true spiritual north. And that this is a journey that had been going on throughout my life. I read the Quran from page to page, end to end, like a storybook, like one word. And there was a lot there that I didn't understand, and I needed explanations. So, Halima's brother, one cold Thursday, took me to the Mimbar in Halingham, and I did my Shahada. Shahada is when you basically say, I believe that there's only one God, and the Prophet ﷺ is his messenger. And from that moment on, I was told to take a shower, and after that, my journey in Islam began. As I stand here today, I'm 11 years in the faith, and I have never regretted it once. Now, as I stand here today, I have come full circle. My mom was a very respected member of society, and I believe I have taken over that mantle now. I am a father of 5 daughters. I've spent the last 10 years, actually 8 of them, as a traveling spouse. My wife has been getting the bacon, and I've been the one who's been cooking it. I want to tell her today how much she has healed me and how much she has done for me as a human being. It is very difficult to find people who will heal you or who will love you despite all your faults, and who will see the bright spark in you when no one else can see it. And she is one such lady. And to be honest, I don't really believe I deserve her. So my comeback is I've gone full circle in life, and I have come back to who I truly was meant to be: a respected member of society, a storyteller, a writer, a father, a husband, and now I'm training to become a restaurateur. I opened a small restaurant in Lavington, which you're all welcome to come to, called Cafe Fatima. The lessons I have learned: death is very important. We say in Islam, every soul will taste death, and that funerals are for the living. Death will change your life in ways you don't expect, and the ones that you love the most will be taken away from you. The earlier you accept that fact, the easier your life will be. Difficult as it is, everybody comes into your life for a season, and when their work is done, they leave. I stand before you here today, no greater man than I was ever before in my life. I have done a lot of internal work. I have worked very hard on myself so that I can be less of a problem to a lot of other people, especially to my family. And true love does exist. You're not born to be single. And finally, I would like to thank Engage. Normally, it's very easy for me to tell other people's stories. I've spent 25 years telling other people's stories. It's been very difficult for me to tell my story because it's me. It's very hard for me to talk about me. It's a bit incestuous, isn't it? But I would like to thank Engage and Agatha and Dawn for giving me this chance. And I would like to thank you, a wonderful audience, for having put up with me and listened to my story. I thank you.